Professor Charles Xavier, mutant leader, loving caretaker, genius teacher, and total absolute jerk. And it's not just that he does some pretty messed up stuff sometimes. Occasionally, Professor X goes full-on supervillain. For all of Xavier's talk about peace and love and harmony, he's the most unscrupulous, hypocritical, and manipulative of all the X-Men. Face it, Magneto was right. Professor X is downright dangerous, and nothing, not even death, can stop him. Easy A. You'd think that a man who runs a school would have some respect for the education system, but you'd be wrong. When Professor X was just regular old Charles Xavier, he totally scammed his way through high school in the worst way. He wasn't even subtle. In class, Charles would read his teachers' minds for answers, and he became the star quarterback by psychically stealing plays from the opposing team. And did he show any remorse about abusing his powers? At home, Charles devoted an entire shelf to the trophies he didn't really earn, so no. He only retired from athletic competition because he got bored of how severely he dominated all of the puny humans. Kinda makes you feel not even too bad about the whole leg thing. When Charles' half-brother, Cain Marko, saw through the charade, he went mad with jealousy, forcing Chuck to put him down with the karate chop. Later, Charles tried to convince his students that Cain was the true villain. But here's all you need to know. After Charles' stepfather died, he kept the family's fortunes to himself, while Cain transformed into Juggernaut and worked as a hired gun. We're not saying that Charles is the bad guy here, but after all of the X-Men are bedridden because of Juggernaut's personal vendetta against Charles that they had nothing to do with, he makes them sweep up the mansion. Certified jerk move. Student body. When Jean Grey showed up at Old Man Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, she was noticed by pretty much everyone except Iceman, who had his own reasons that weren't revealed for about 50 years. Angel, Beast, and Cyclops all instantly have the hots for Jean, and when Wolverine shows up, it's more of the same. There's also the creepy bald mentor who serves as both Jean's teacher and surrogate father figure and lusts after Jean in secret for years after slapping her in a skin-tight costume. Thankfully, aside from a single panel in X-Men number 3 in which Professor X laments that the only thing keeping him and Jean apart is his disability, yeah right, the issue only comes up once more, but in a very big way. In the 90s, when Professor X's darkest thoughts manifested themselves as an alternate personality called Onslaught, his crush on Jean makes a surprising reappearance, making it clear that Xavier's had a thing for Jean for years. It's unsettling at best and makes a lot of those early X-Men comics in which Jean is clearly the Professor's favorite student a whole heck of a lot creepier. Control yourself, dude. Big fake out. Professor X used some pretty interesting methods to train the unruly mutants at his school, and when throwing them into the life-threatening danger room wasn't enough, he wasn't above using psychological abuse to keep them in order.
Thanks, Jubilee. You were right. Xavier's totally right.
In X-Men number 4, Xavier loses his powers only to reveal an issue later that, surprise, he was faking in order to give the X-Men a pop quiz. In X-Men number 42, it gets even worse. In a battle with a creature called Grotesque the Subhuman, an explosion takes Xavier's life, and the X-Men spend the next 2 years mourning. 2 years! And yet, in X-Men number 65, Xavier smugly rolls back into their lives, alive and perfectly healthy. Because the guy who died wasn't even Xavier in the first place, as it turns out, he'd swapped places with a shape-shifting mutant called Changeling, who was basically the world's most dangerous Make-A-Wish kid. Changeling, a former villain, had been diagnosed with terminal illness and wanted to use his last few months on Earth to make a difference. So Professor X let him lead the X-Men. Meanwhile, Xavier locked himself in a basement and devised a plan to defeat an impending alien invasion. When Changeling fell during battle, Professor X decided to let them grieve instead of letting them in on the gag. For 2 years. Class act, Charles. Giant-sized jerk. In Giant Size X-Men number 1, Professor X recruits a brand new group of X-Men, including mainstays like Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Storm, and Colossus, to rescue his original band of mutants, from Krakoa, the Living Island, rebooting the struggling X-Men series in the process. However, as the X-Men learn in Deadly Genesis, in a storyline basically lifted from Futurama, complete with a bald old weirdo genius, our heroes are actually the B Squad.
Are you three by any chance interested in becoming my new spaceship crew?
New crew? Or what happened to the old crew?
That's not important.
Before Cyclops led the new group of X-Men to victory, Xavier deployed an entirely different group of superheroes to rescue his former students, and then erased everyone's memory of the team when they all apparently died. Now, unfortunately for Xavier, one of those mutants actually survived and called him out. Gabriel, a mutant with the codename Vulcan, who also happened to be the little brother of Cyclops and Havoc. After the mission to Krakoa goes south, Cyclops is understandably distraught by Vulcan's supposed death, so Xavier deletes all of Scott's memories of his brother in order to keep him calm. That doesn't work out so well when Vulcan returns from space. In his quest for vengeance, Vulcan kills a few mutants and tells Cyclops and Havoc the truth, turning them against Xavier. Together, the X-Men stop Vulcan, but Cyclops banishes a now powerless Xavier from the X-Mansion. Honestly, erasing your team leader's memory of his awesome space bro because you got him killed is a tool move. The Xavier Protocols. Everyone knows that when Batman created a series of plans to kill his Justice League teammates, it didn't work out so well. Everyone knows except for Professor X, who did the exact same thing. Yes, the surrogate father and mentor of the X-Men figured out in detail how to kill each one of them, which is revealed in Excalibur number 100. After Onslaught takes over Professor X's mind, the X-Men visit Moira McTaggart's research lab to retrieve the Xavier Protocols, which explain how to murder every mutant on the team. Need to get rid of Wolverine? Simply sever his head and put it somewhere else. Got a problem with Cable? Just amp up the technovirus that's slowly consuming his body, allowing the disease to ravage his brain and body. A suit of anti-psionic armor will topple Professor X himself. Now, if you guessed that this story doesn't have a happy ending, well, you know how comics work. In X-Men number 65, a human Sentinel hybrid named Bastion uses the Xavier Protocols to defeat the team. In X-Men number 84, Professor X's mutant tracking computer, Cerebro, comes to life and uses the protocols against the X-Men when they try to stop it from taking over humanity. In both cases, the X-Men prevail, but not for Professor X's lack of trying. Brain Drain. After Cyclops killed Professor X at the end of Avengers vs. X-Men, most people assumed Xavier's reign of terror was over. They were wrong. In Uncanny Avengers number 1, the Red Skull steals Professor X's brain and uses its psychic powers to try and wipe out mutant kind for good. It almost works too. Using Xavier's powers, the Red Skull brainwashes the Scarlet Witch, who drove mutants to the brink of extinction in House of M, and tries to get her to do it again. Next, he incites an anti-mutant mob in Manhattan and manipulates Thor into turning against his teammates. Later, the Red Skull transforms himself into Red Onslaught and uses Professor X's powers to start World War Hate. And when the Avengers and the X-Men try to use a spell to bring out Xavier's better nature, they inadvertently turn all of the heroes into villains and all the villains into heroes, kicking off Marvel's epic Axis event. That's Chuck for you. Dead for years, still up to no good. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.